The Grand Assembly Station hung in the darkness between stars like a jewel made of light and metal. It was the largest structure ever built by the Galactic Confederation. Thousands of ships came and went from its docking rings every day. Inside its great halls, representatives from 412 species argued, negotiated, and shaped the future of known space. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had walked these halls for 15 years. She knew every corridor, every meeting room, every quiet corner where deals were made away from official records. Her hair had turned gray in service to humanity's place among the stars. Her eyes had grown tired from reading reports and treaties and proposals. But her voice remained strong, and her belief in what the Confederation could be had never wavered. Until today, she stood at the speaking platform in the center of the assembly chamber. The room rose round her in great circular tiers, each level filled with delegates from different worlds. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others sat in sealed chambers filled with methane or chlorine. Some had forearms. Some had none. Some communicated through colors that rippled across their skin. The translation systems built into the chamber converted everything into something everyone could understand. Elena looked up at them all and felt something break inside her chest. "The vote is complete," announced the assembly speaker, a tall karate with silver scales and patient eyes. "The motion to recognize Velthari territorial claims over the sanctuary systems passes with a margin of 62%. Elena closed her eyes for a moment. The sanctuary systems, 3 small planets orbiting a quiet yellow star, home to species that had not yet discovered fire, creatures that looked up at the night sky with wonder and had no idea that their fate had just been decided by beings they would never meet. The Velthari delegation sat in the upper tiers, their long bodies draped over specially designed couches. They were an old species, powerful and wealthy, with a fleet that could challenge any 3 other members combined. Their representative, a female named Visara, watched Elena with something like amusement in her golden eyes. "The Confederation thanks all delegates for their participation in this historic vote." The speaker continued, "The matter is now, I request the floor." Elena's voice cut through the chamber. The speaker paused, his scales shifting to a color that indicated mild surprise. "Ambassador Vasquez, the vote is concluded. Speeches are no longer, I request the floor," Elena repeated. "One final time, as is my right under Section 47 of the Assembly Charter." The speaker was silent for a moment. Then he gestured with one long arm. "The floor recognizes the human delegation." Elena looked around the chamber once more. So many species, so many worlds. 40 years ago, humanity had stood before the same assembly, new and small and eager to join something greater than themselves. They had believed in the Confederation's ideals. They had fought for them, bled for them, worked tirelessly to prove themselves worthy partners. "I will not repeat my arguments," Elena said. Her voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. "You have heard them. You have considered them. You have rejected them. That is your right." She paused. In the silence, a Meridian delegate coughed nervously. "I want to be clear about what has happened today," Elena continued. 3 worlds filled with living beings, creatures who feel pain and fear and love. Creatures who raise their young and mourn their dead have been handed over to a species that has already announced plans to strip mine their planets for resources. These beings will die. All of them. Not in war, but in the pursuit of profit. And this assembly has decided that this is acceptable. The Sara made a sound that the translator rendered as polite laughter. The human delegate dramatizes. Primitive species expire naturally all the time. The galaxy does not stop turning. Elena turned to look at the Velthari representative. Her face showed no anger, no hatred, only a profound and terrible sadness. "No," Elena said softly. "The galaxy does not stop turning." She reached into her jacket and removed a small data chip. She placed it on the speaking platform. "This contains the formal notice of humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Confederation, effective immediately. All treaties, all agreements, all shared obligations are hereby terminated. Human citizens will be evacuated from Confederation space within 90 standard days. Human assets will be transferred or liquidated according to established protocols." For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The chamber was utterly silent. Then the Meridian delegate laughed. It was a nervous sound, high and thin, a negotiating tactic, very dramatic. But the human delegation cannot seriously expect. This is not a negotiation, Elena said. This is a notification. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the rest of the human delegation, 12 men and women who had dedicated their lives to building bridges between worlds, stood and followed. The silence broke. Voices rose from every tier. The speaker was calling for order. The karate delegation was demanding an explanation. The Solani representatives were already composing urgent messages to their home world. But Elena did not look back. The great doors of the assembly chamber were 20 meters tall, carved from the shell of a space creature that had died 1,000,000 years before humanity learned to walk upright. They were the most famous doors in the galaxy. Every species that had ever joined the Confederation had walked through them. Now humans walked through them for the last time. Ambassador Thesara watched them go. Her fur eyes blinked in a pattern that indicated mild confusion. She turned to her aide, a younger Velthri with nervous movements. They will return, Thesara said. Within a week, 2 at most. Their economy depends on galactic trade. They cannot survive isolation. Her aide made a gesture of agreement. Of course, Ambassador. This is merely theater. But across the chamber, old Councillor Seath of the Karate watched the doors close behind the human delegation. He was 300 years old, ancient even by his species' standards. He had been present when humanity first joined the Confederation. He remembered the hope in their eyes, the eagerness in their voices, the genuine belief that they could help build something better. He remembered something else too, something most of the younger delegates had forgotten or never knew. During their integration period, humanity had been required to demonstrate their military capabilities. It was standard procedure. Every new species had to show they could contribute to collective defense. The humans had complied, as they always did. They had shown their ships, their weapons, their tactics. But Councillor Seath had noticed something odd in the records. Gaps, omissions. The humans had shown enough to satisfy the requirements, but their demonstrations had felt somehow incomplete, like a student answering a test with the minimum necessary effort, carefully avoiding any extra credit. At the time, he had dismissed it as human awkwardness. They were new to galactic society. Perhaps they simply did not understand the protocols. Now, watching those great doors close, Councillor Seath felt the first cold touch of doubt. What if the humans had understood perfectly? What if they had shown only what they wanted to show? He kept these thoughts to himself. There was no point in voicing them. The vote was done. The humans were leaving. And surely the sorrow was right. They would return. They needed the Confederation too much to stay away, surely. In the corridor outside the assembly chamber, Elena Vasquez walked with her delegation toward the docking bay where their ship waited. Her steps were steady. Her face was calm, but her hands, hidden at her sides, were trembling. Deputy Ambassador Chen fell into step beside her. He was a younger man, only 10 years in the diplomatic service. His face was pale. "Elena," he said quietly, "what happens now?" "Now we go home," Elena said, "and we get to work. The council will try to open negotiations. Back channels, unofficial talks. They'll offer concessions. Yes, will we respond?" Elena stopped walking. Around her, the other delegates stopped too. They stood in the corridor, 12 humans surrounded by the sounds and smells of 100 alien species, going about their daily business, completely unaware that something fundamental had just changed. "Marcus," Elena said gently, "do you understand why we left?" Chen hesitated. "The vote, the sanctuary systems." "No," Elena shook her head. "The vote was the end of something, not the beginning. We left because we finally understood what the Confederation truly is. Not what it claims to be, not what we hoped it would be. What it actually is." She looked back toward the assembly chamber. "For 40 years, we tried to make this work. We compromised. We accommodated. We told ourselves that slow progress was better than no progress. We watched species suffer and die, and we told ourselves that at least we were at the table. At least we could influence outcomes. At least we were doing some good." Her voice hardened slightly. "And today we learned that we were wrong. We were not influencing outcomes. We were providing cover for them. Every time we stayed silent, every time we accepted half measures, we told the Velthari and species like them that their behavior was acceptable, that the Confederation would always find a way to excuse them. She turned back to her delegation. So no, we will not respond to back channels. We will not accept concessions. We will not give them the chance to buy us off with small gifts while they continue to do exactly what? The withdrawal happened slowly. That was what surprised everyone the most. In the days after Ambassador Vasquez walked out of the assembly, the galactic media had predicted chaos. They expected protests, dramatic gestures, perhaps even isolated violence. Human citizens across Confederation space would surely resist evacuation. Human businesses would fight to protect their investments. Human military vessels would make threatening patrols along disputed borders. None of that happened. Instead, humanity simply began to leave, quietly, professionally, without drama or complaint. Dr. Kira Selmuth was a karate xenobiologist stationed at the Joint Research Institute on Harmony Station. For 8 years, she had worked alongside a human colleague named David Park. They had published 12 papers together. They had spent countless hours debating theories, sharing meals, telling each other stories about their HOMEWORLDS. 3 weeks after the assembly vote, David came to her laboratory with a small box in his hands. "I wanted to give you this," he said. Kira took the box and opened it. Inside was a data crystal containing every piece of research they had ever worked on together. Every note, every failed experiment, every breakthrough moment captured in meticulous detail. "I do not understand," Kira said. Her scales shifted to pale blue, the color of confusion. "We have months of work left on the current project. I'm finishing my contractual obligations early," David said. "My replacement will arrive tomorrow. A Solani researcher named Tom. I've briefed him on everything. He's good. You'll like working with him." "But why?" Kira asked. "The evacuation deadline is still 60 days away. There's no need to rush." David smiled. It was a sad smile, Kira realized. A tired smile. "It's time to go home, Kira. My people need me there." "For what purpose?" David did not answer. He simply clasped her shoulder in the human gesture of friendship, turned, and walked out of the laboratory. Kira never saw him again. Similar scenes played out across Confederation space. Human engineers completed their projects ahead of schedule. Human merchants fulfilled their contracts to the letter, then politely declined to negotiate new ones. Human teachers finished their semesters, graded their final exams, and booked passage on outbound ships. The Confederation had prepared for resistance. They had prepared for negotiation. They had not prepared for this calm, methodical departure on the planet Valora Prime, the financial capital of the Confederation. Human trading companies closed their offices one by one. They paid all outstanding debts. They settled all accounts. They donated their office furniture to local charities and walked away with nothing but personal belongings. "It is strange," remarked senior trader Hasheth of the Meridian Banking Guild. "In my 300 years, I have never seen a species leave money on the table. The humans could have extracted far more favorable terms if they had negotiated their withdrawal. Instead, they simply left." His assistant, a young Meridian with nervous eyes, pulled up a display of trade statistics. "Our analysts project a minor disruption to certain supply chains. Human-produced entertainment media will no longer be available. Several pharmaceutical compounds they manufactured will need alternative sources. But overall, the economic impact should be manageable." Hasheth studied the numbers. They seemed reasonable. Humans were, after all, only one species among hundreds. They had never been major players in galactic trade. Their departure was inconvenient, certainly, but hardly catastrophic. So why did Hasheth feel so uneasy? "Monitor the situation," he said. "Closely. I want weekly reports." "Yes, senior trader." Hasheth turned back to his window, looking out at the endless towers of Valora Prime. Somewhere out there, the last human trading ships were loading cargo for the journey home. He wondered what they were taking with them. Far from the financial centers, in the patrol corridors between civilized space and the outer darkness, Captain Yenna Strauss of the Confederation Defense Fleet watched her tactical display with growing concern. For 15 years, human vessels had participated in joint patrols along the frontier. They were good ships, well-crewed and reliable. Not the most powerful in the fleet, but solid, dependable. Now they were leaving. The last human destroyer departed 3 hours ago, her tactical officer reported. They completed their patrol rotation, transferred all relevant intelligence to our database, and set course for Sol System. Any communication? Any message? Only a standard courtesy transmission thanking us for 15 years of cooperation. Nothing else. Captain Strauss leaned back in her command chair. The humans had always been professional. Distant, perhaps, but professional. In 15 years, she had never seen a human vessel break formation or abandon a patrol early. They did their job, and they did it well. And now they were gone. Sir, her sensor officer called out. I'm detecting unusual activity along the human border. Define unusual. New construction. Automated defense platforms being deployed at regular intervals along the boundary. They appear to be of human manufacture, but I don't recognize the design specifications. Captain Strauss frowned. Threat assessment? Unknown. They're not targeting anything. They're just there. Open a channel. Request identification and purpose. The sensor officer worked his console for several moments. Then he looked up with confusion in his eyes. No response. Captain, the platforms are broadcasting a single message on repeat. Human space is not currently accepting visitors. Please redirect your course. Thank you for your understanding. That's it. That's it. Captain Strauss stared at her display. The human border had always been open. Ships came and went freely, following standard protocols. Now it was closing, sealing itself behind automated sentries that gave no explanation and accepted no argument. What are they doing in there? She muttered. No one answered. No one knew. 6 months passed. The Confederation returned to normal or something like it. The Velthri began their expansion into the sanctuary systems. The Assembly debated trade policies and territorial disputes. Traders bought and sold. Ships flew their routes. Life continued. But small things began to go wrong. The Universal Translation Protocol, the system that allowed hundreds of species to communicate with each other, started developing glitches. The core algorithms had been designed by a joint team of human and karate linguists. 30 years ago, the karate maintained their section perfectly, but the human section had been maintained by human engineers who were now gone. The replacement team did their best, but they did not fully understand the original design. Translations became slightly less accurate. Idioms that had once converted smoothly now produced confusion. Diplomatic communications that had been clear became ambiguous. It was a minor inconvenience. Nothing more. The emergency response network along the outer rim reported increasing failures. The beacon system had been installed by human engineers as a gift to the Confederation, a way to call for help from anywhere in known space. Human maintenance crews had kept it running for decades. Now the beacons were failing, one by one. New crews could not figure out how to repair them. The original specifications had been stored in databases that humans had taken with them. When they left, ships began to go missing in the outer rim. Not many, but more than before. The Joint Medical Research Initiative reported delays in their disease response programs. 3 critical projects had been led by human researchers, who had departed without training replacements. The remaining scientists worked frantically to catch up, but human methodology was different from other species. Human notes were written in human languages that translation software handled imperfectly. A minor plague on the Solani homeworld lasted 2 months longer than it should have because no one could understand the human treatment protocols that had been designed for exactly that disease. Small things, inconvenient things, nothing catastrophic. But Counselor Seath of the karate watched these small things add up, and he felt the coldness in his chest grow deeper. His research team had been working for 6 months now, reviewing every record they could find about human military capabilities. What they discovered disturbed him. The humans showed us their standard fleet configuration during integration. His lead researcher reported 12 destroyer-class vessels, for cruisers, 1 battleship. Respectable but not impressive. Consistent with a species of their development level. And what did we miss? The researcher hesitated. Sir, we found references to a human military doctrine called strategic reserve. It appears in several of their historical databases. The concept involves maintaining hidden assets that are never revealed to potential adversaries. Hidden assets? What kind of assets? We don't know. The references are vague. But we did find one interesting data point. The researcher pulled up a display. During the integration period, humans were asked to provide a census of their shipyard capacity. They reported 17 active shipyards capable of producing military vessels, and according to astronomical surveys of their home system conducted by karate observation posts, we have detected at least 43 major construction facilities in and around Seoul. Not 17, 43. Councillor Seath was silent for a long moment. They lied. Not exactly. Sir, they reported 17 shipyards capable of producing military vessels. The other facilities may be designated for civilian purposes. It is technically possible they told the truth, but unlikely. Yes, sir. Very unlikely. Councillor Seath stood and walked to 18 months of silence. That was how the galactic media described it. 18 months since humans had spoken a word to anyone outside their borders. 18 months since any ship had entered or left human space. 18 months of waiting for something to happen, anything at all. Nothing happened. The Velthri had completed their conquest of the sanctuary systems. The primitive species that had lived there were gone now, wiped from existence to make room for mining operations. The Assembly had passed a resolution expressing mild concern about the excessive loss of life. The Velthri had ignored it. No one had been surprised. 3 more species had followed humanity's example and withdrawn from the Confederation. The Karate remained, but their participation in assembly votes had become increasingly reluctant. The Silani had proposed reform measures 17 times. Each time, they were voted down by the established power blocks. The Confederation was not collapsing. Not exactly, but it was fraying at the edges, wearing thin in places where it had once been strong, and still, humanity said nothing. Deputy Director Yashni of Confederation Intelligence sat in her office on the Grand Assembly Station, reviewing reports that told her almost nothing useful. Human border status? Unchanged, her assistant replied. Automated platforms continue to redirect all vessels. No signals detected. No communications accepted. Trade route analysis? Several peripheral supply chains have failed completely. The Outer Rim Emergency Network is now operating at 34% capacity. 6 more beacon stations failed last month, and the translation protocols? Degrading. Our linguists are doing their best, but the human components of the system are beyond their ability to maintain. We're seeing increased communication errors between species. 3 diplomatic incidents last month were traced to translation failures. Yashni rubbed her eyes. She was tired. Everyone in her department was tired. They had been trying to penetrate the human silence for 18 months, and they had nothing to show for it. Any activity at all. Anything new. Her assistant hesitated. Actually, yes. Our long-range sensor station in the Kellis sector detected something unusual 3 hours ago. Yashni sat up straighter. Define unusual. A vessel emerging from human space. Single ship. Moving toward Confederation territory at moderate speed. For a moment, Yashni forgot to breathe. 18 months of nothing, and now this. Classification? Unknown. The design doesn't match anything in our database threat assessment. Also unknown. The ship isn't broadcasting any identification. It's just coming. Yashni was already reaching for her communication panel. The assembly leadership needed to know. The defense fleet needed to be alerted. After 18 months of silence, the humans were finally making a move. But what kind of move? Fleet Admiral Korvath of the Meridian Coalition received his orders within the hour. He was to take a task force to intercept the human vessel. His instructions were clear. Make contact, assess intentions. Avoid provocation unless directly threatened. And if they are hostile, he asked the communication screen. Deputy Director Yashni's face was tense. They won't be. At least, I don't think they will be. If humans wanted a war, they've had 18 months to start one. This is something else. What? I don't know. That's what you're going to find out. Admiral Korvath assembled his fleet. 12 warships for heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, 2 electronic warfare vessels. It was not the largest force in the Confederation, but it was enough to handle any reasonable threat, assuming the threat was reasonable. The intercept point was an empty stretch of space between two star systems, far from any inhabited worlds. Admiral Korvath positioned his fleet in a standard defensive formation and waited. The human ship emerged from faster-than-light travel exactly on schedule. Admiral Korvath watched it appear on his tactical display and felt his stomach tighten. The ship was massive, easily twice the size of his flagship. Its hull was smooth and dark, with none of the exposed weapons ports or sensor rays that characterized Confederation warships. It looked less like a military vessel and more like a fragment of the void itself. Given form and purpose, analysis, Korvath demanded. His tactical officer worked furiously at his console. Sir, I'm detecting power signatures that don't match anything in our database. The hull material is absorbing most of our sensor beams. I can't determine internal layout, crew complement, or armament. Best guess on weapons capability. I can't even guess, sir. This ship is unlike anything we've ever seen. The communication officer spoke up. Sir, they're hailing us. Audio only. Put it through. A voice filled the bridge. It was a human woman's voice, calm and professional, with no trace of emotion. This is the United Earth Ship Remembrance to Confederation Task Force. We are on a diplomatic mission. We request permission to deliver a message to Fleet Admiral Korvath. Korvath exchanged glances with his first officer. The Meridian woman's eyes were wide with uncertainty. This is Admiral Korvath, he said. I receive your transmission. What is the nature of your message? We carry a data crystal containing information from the United Earth government. This information is intended for distribution to Confederation leadership. We request permission to deliver the crystal via probe, not in person. There was a brief pause. Our instructions are to deliver the message and return home. We are not authorized to engage in extended communication or negotiation. Korvath considered his options. He could demand more information. He could insist on a face-to-face meeting. He could even attempt to board the vessel. But something told him that none of those options would work. The humans had been silent for 18 months. They had come to say something, not to talk. And that massive ship, running dark and silent, made it very clear that they would deliver their message on their own terms or not at all. Permission granted, Korvath said. You may deliver your probe. Acknowledged. Probe launching now. The Remembrance opened a small bay in its forward hull. A tiny probe, no larger than a shuttle, emerged and crossed the space between them. It docked with Korvath's flagship with perfect precision. Message delivered, the voice said. The United Earth Ship Remembrance will now return to home territory. We wish you clarity in your deliberations. Before Korvath could respond, the massive ship turned and engaged its faster-than-light drive. It vanished into the darkness, leaving 12 Confederation warships alone in the empty void. What just happened? His first officer asked. I don't know, Korvath replied. But I think we're about to find out. They retrieved the data crystal from the probe. It contained a single file, a recording, 93 minutes long. Admiral Korvath watched it alone in his quarters, and by the time it was finished, his hands were shaking. The recording began with a simple title card, What We Have Become. Then it showed him things that he had not imagined possible. The recording showed human shipyards, not the 17 facilities they had reported to the Confederation, but hundreds of them. Giant construction complexes orbiting distant moons, underground factories carved into asteroids, automated assembly lines that never stopped, never slept, never rested. It showed the ships being built in those yards, vessels that made the Remembrance look small, weapons platforms that could project destructive force across entire star systems, defense networks that could seal off human space against any conceivable attack. It showed training exercises, human soldiers drilling in environments that would kill most species, human pilots flying maneuvers that defied physics, human commanders running simulations against every major Confederation military power and winning, every time, with overwhelming efficiency. It showed research laboratories developing technologies that the Confederation had only dreamed of. New forms of faster-than-light travel. New weapons that could disable entire fleets without destroying them. New defensive systems that could absorb attacks that should have been unstoppable. And then, at the very end, it showed a map. The map displayed human space, the small territory that had been assigned to them when they joined the Confederation 40 years ago. Then it zoomed out, showing the space around human territory. Then it zoomed out again. And again, Admiral Korvath watched as the true extent of human expansion was revealed. They had not simply built up their military within their assigned borders. They had quietly, secretly, expanded into the vast empty regions beyond the Confederation's reach. They had claimed territory that no one else wanted. They had built infrastructure that no one else had noticed. Human space was not small. It was enormous, and it had been growing for decades while everyone else looked the other way. The recording ended with a message. Text displayed on screen in the simple, direct style humans favored. We have not forgotten why we left. We have not forgotten the species you chose to sacrifice. We wanted you to understand what could have been your ally and what you have made your stranger. We do not seek war. We will not start one. But we are no longer willing to pretend that your civilization's values align with ours. This is not a threat. This is clarity. Admiral Korvath sat in the darkness of his quarters for a long time after the recording ended. His flagship, the pride of the Meridian Coalition, had seemed so powerful when they had departed. Now it felt small, fragile, like a child's toy. He thought about what would have happened. The assembly chamber had never been so quiet. 389 delegations filled the tiered seats, representatives from nearly every species in the Confederation. They had come expecting debate, argument, the usual political theater that defined galactic governance. Instead, they sat in stunned silence as the recording played on the massive display screens that dominated the chamber walls. Ambassador Thesara of the Velthri watched with narrowed eyes. Her long body was coiled tight on its couch, every muscle tense. Around her, the other members of her delegation exchanged uncertain glances. This was not possible. This could not be real. But the recording continued, relentless and undeniable. Human shipyards, human weapons, human territory stretching far beyond anything they had admitted to possessing. A military force that made the entire Confederation look like children playing at war. When the final message appeared on screen, this is not a threat. This is clarity. The silence in the chamber became absolute. The assembly speaker, his silver scales pale with shock, attempted to restore order. The assembly will now hear discussion of the communication received from the human government. Delegates may. This is obvious fabrication. Thesara interrupted. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the murmurs that had begun to fill the chamber. Computer-generated imagery. Propaganda designed to frighten us into concessions. Fleet Admiral Korvath witnessed the vessel that delivered this message. The speaker replied. His report confirms that the technology displayed is consistent with what he observed. Admiral Korvath is a Meridian, Thesara said dismissively. The Meridians have always been soft on humans. His analysis cannot be trusted. A new voice spoke from the upper tiers. Counselor Seath of the Karate rose slowly to his feet, his ancient body trembling with the effort. I have conducted independent analysis of this recording, he said. My people have been studying human capabilities for 18 months. Everything in this message is consistent with our findings. In fact, our estimates suggested that human military power was significant. We underestimated them. You also cannot be trusted, Thesara snapped. The Karate have grown weak. You seek human protection because you fear standing on your own. I seek truth. Seath replied calmly, something that has been in short supply in this chamber for many years. The debates continued for hours. Some delegates demanded immediate military action against human space, insisting that the Confederation must strike before humanity decided to use its newfound power. Others called for diplomatic missions, desperate attempts to reopen communication before the situation deteriorated further. The Velthri bloc pushed hardest for aggression. They had just completed their conquest of the sanctuary systems. They had demonstrated their strength to the galaxy. They would not be intimidated by human tricks and illusions. We should form a combined fleet. Ambassador Thesara declared, "The largest armada in Confederation history. We should advance to the human border and demand negotiations. Show them that we will not be frightened by recordings and shadows. And if they refuse to negotiate," asked a Solani delegate, her voice thick with worry, "then we will make them negotiate." Thesara said, "Humans are flesh and blood like any other species. They can be killed. They can be conquered. We simply need the will to act." The assembly voted. The motion to form a combined fleet passed by a narrow margin. The Velthri and their allies had enough votes to push it through. Despite strong opposition from the Karati, the Solani, and a dozen smaller species, Councillor Seath watched the vote with heavy hearts. He knew what was coming. He had seen the recording. He understood what the humans had shown them and, more importantly, what they had not shown. The recording had displayed human shipyards and weapons. It had revealed the true size of human territory, but it had said nothing about human intentions, nothing about what they would do if the Confederation came to their borders with warships and demands. The humans had given them clarity. They had not given them safety. 3 months later, the combined fleet assembled at the edge of human space. It was the largest military force ever gathered by the Confederation to 100 warships from 17 different species, carrying enough firepower to devastate entire planets. Fleet Admiral Korvath had been given command. Despite his protests, the assembly wanted an experienced officer who understood the humans. Korvath understood them too well, which was exactly why he had not wanted this assignment. But orders were orders. The fleet approached the human border and stopped. Automated platforms drifted in the darkness ahead, broadcasting their simple message: "Human space is not currently accepting visitors. Please redirect your course. Open a channel," Korvath ordered. "All frequencies. Maximum power." His communication officer worked the controls. "Channel open, Admiral." Korvath took a deep breath. "This is Fleet Admiral Korvath of the Galactic Confederation Combined Fleet. To any human authority listening, we come representing the united will of the Confederation Assembly. We seek to open diplomatic discussions regarding the future relationship between our peoples. Please respond." "Silence. Repeat the message," Korvath said. They repeated it, and again, and again. No response came. "Perhaps they do not wish to speak with us," suggested his Velthri liaison officer, a young male named Thiessen who was Ambassador Thesara's nephew. "Perhaps we should demonstrate that silence is not an option. What do you propose?" Thiessen gestured at the tactical display. "The automated platforms. They are clearly the first line of defense. If we destroy a few of them, we show the humans that we mean business. Force them to engage with us. And if they interpret that as an act of war," Thiessen made a dismissive gesture with his upper arms, "then we will have war, which is what many in the assembly want anyway. Better to fight now, while we have our fleet assembled, than to wait and allow humans to grow even stronger." Admiral Korvath looked at the young Velthri with something like pity. He had seen the recording. He knew what human warships could do. This fleet, for all its size and power, would not survive a battle with the forces humanity had built. But he also knew that the assembly had given him clear instructions. If diplomacy failed, he was authorized to take limited military action to force human engagement. "Target the nearest platform," he said quietly. "Weapons free on my command, Admiral." "Do it." The tactical officer designated the target. Weapons systems across the fleet locked onto the small automated platform drifting in the darkness. "Firing solution ready, Admiral." Korvath hesitated. Every instinct told him this was wrong. Every lesson he had learned in 50 years of military service screamed at him to stop. But orders were orders. "Fire," he said. 100 weapons spoke at once. Plasma beams, missiles, kinetic projectiles, the concentrated firepower of the mightiest fleet in Confederation history, converged on a single small platform. That the platform vanished in a flash of light. For a moment, nothing happened. The fleet held position. Sensors scanned the darkness for any sign of human response. Then the response came. It did not come from in front of them. It came from behind. A ship appeared in the space between the fleet and Confederation territory. One moment there was empty void. The next moment, there was a vessel. Admiral Korvath recognized it instantly. The remembrance. The same ship that had delivered the recording 3 months ago, except now it was not alone. More ships appeared. 10, 20, 50, 100. They emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, surrounding the combined fleet in a sphere of dark hulls and hidden weapons. Each ship was massive, easily matching or exceeding the largest vessels in Korvath's command, and they had appeared behind the fleet, between the Confederation forces and home. "Admiral," the tactical officer said, his voice trembling, "I'm detecting power signatures from the human vessels. They're charging weapons. How many ships?" "I count 147. "But Admiral, these are not the same ships from the recording." "What do you mean?" "The recording showed their shipyards building a specific class of vessel. These ships are different, larger, more advanced. The recording showed us what they had 18 months ago. This is what they have now." Korvath felt the blood drain from his face. The humans had continued building. While the Confederation debated and argued and assembled its fleet, humanity had been working, improving, preparing. And now they were here. The communication panel crackled. A voice filled the bridge, the same calm female voice from the first encounter. "This is the United Earth Fleet to Confederation Combined Force. You have committed an act of aggression against human territory. Your fleet is now surrounded. Your weapons are outmatched. Your position is hopeless." Korvath forced himself to respond. "This was a demonstration. We sought only to open communication. You succeeded," the voice replied. "You have our attention. Now hear us clearly." A pause. "We have watched you for 40 years. We have seen what your Confederation truly is. We have watched you sacrifice the weak to feed the strong. We have watched you debate morality while species died. We have watched you pretend that profit is progress and conquest is civilization. We wanted no part of it. So we left. We asked only to be left alone. You chose not to leave us alone. You assembled this fleet. You crossed the void. You destroyed one of our platforms. And now you expect us to negotiate with you." Another pause, longer this time. "We will not negotiate. Not with this fleet. Not with this. 5 years had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Confederation. 5 years of silence, of change, of a galaxy slowly learning to see itself clearly. The combined fleet had been released after 8 months of containment. They had not been harmed. Not a single shot had been fired after that first destroyed platform. The humans had simply held them there, surrounded and helpless, while their supplies dwindled and their crews grew desperate. When they were finally allowed to leave, they returned home as broken men and women. Not physically. Humanity had even provided emergency supplies when starvation became a real danger. But something inside them had shattered during those long months of waiting in the darkness. They had seen what humanity could do, and they had been given time to think about why humanity had chosen not to do it. The recordings had been broadcast across the Confederation. Exactly as promised, every species saw the aggression of the combined fleet. Every species saw the human response. Every species was forced to ask themselves, which side do we want to be on? The answers came slowly at first, then faster and faster. The Karate were the first to reach out. Counselor Seath himself made the journey to human space, traveling alone in a small diplomatic vessel. He was the first non-human to be admitted past the border in 6 years. What he found there changed him. He found a civilization that had not been idle during its isolation. The humans had built new cities, new technologies, new ways of living together. But more than that, they had built something else, a network of relationships with species outside the Confederation. The primitives of the sanctuary systems were gone. That could not be undone. But humanity had found others, dozens of pre-space flight species scattered across the galaxy, vulnerable and unprotected. Humanity had not conquered them or exploited them. Instead, they had quietly placed guardian stations in their systems, watching over them from a distance, protecting them without interfering in their development. "We failed the ones we could not save," the human president told Counselor Seath. "We will not fail the ones we still can." The Karate joined the new compact that humanity was building. Then the Solani. Then the Meridians, who had seen their fleet humiliated and had decided they wanted no part of the old confederations. Future. Other species followed. Not all of them, not even most of them. The Velthri and their allies remained defiant. insisting that humanity's display of power was merely intimidation, that given time and determination, they could still prevail. But enough species joined to create something new, something built on different principles than the old Confederation. They called it the Compact of Equals. The rules were simple. Every member species had one voice, regardless of military power or economic wealth. Decisions required true consensus, not majority votes that could be bought or bullied. And most importantly, the protection of vulnerable species was not a suggestion, it was an absolute requirement. Any member who preyed on the weak would be expelled immediately. Any member who stood by while others preyed on the weak would face the same consequence. The compact would be small, perhaps exclusive, but it would mean something. It would not be another confederation. Chancellor Tova of the Solani made the formal announcement of her species' membership on a cold morning in their capital city. She was young for a leader, barely 200 years old. She had been a minor diplomat when humanity walked out of the assembly. Now she was the voice of her people. "We have spent too long pretending that neutrality is virtue," she said to the gathered crowds. "We have spent too long convincing ourselves that refusing to act is the same as refusing to harm. It is not. When we watch evil happen and do nothing, we become part of it." She paused. Looking up at the gray sky, the humans showed us what strength truly means. Not the ability to destroy any fool with weapons can destroy. True strength is the ability to protect. True strength is the willingness to stand between the powerful and the helpless. No matter the cost, the Silani choose to be strong. Not with weapons, though we will build them if we must. Strong with our hearts. Strong with our convictions. Strong with our refusal to ever again look away when someone needs us. The crowds cheered. Not all of them, perhaps. Change was hard, and fear was easier than courage. But enough of them cheered to carry the sound across the city, across the world, across the stars to where human vessels waited to welcome their new partners. The old Confederation still existed. It was smaller now, weaker, divided between those who clung to the old ways and those who had not yet found the courage to leave. The Velthri still spoke of future conquest, of teaching humanity a lesson they would never forget. But they spoke more quietly now, and they made no move toward human space. Everyone knew what was waiting there, on Earth, in a garden outside the capital city. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat on a bench and watched the sunset. She was old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with decades of work and worry. Retirement had come 5 years ago, but she could not quite bring herself to stop watching, stop caring, stop wondering if they had done the right thing. A younger woman sat down beside her. Admiral Cheney had been promoted twice since the standoff, though he still preferred to be called Marcus by those who knew him. "The first ships from the Solani arrived today," he said. "They're docking at the new station." Tova herself came along for the official ceremony. "Good." Elena nodded slowly. "That's good. There's something else, something I thought you should see." He handed her a tablet. On it was a report from one of the Guardian stations, the Silent, sentinels that watch over primitive species throughout the galaxy. Elena read it twice before she understood what she was seeing. The fourth sanctuary system. She said quietly, "Yes, they missed one. They missed one." Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. She had thought they were all gone. She had spent 5 years carrying the weight of those deaths, telling herself that at least their sacrifice had meant something, had started the change that was now reshaping the galaxy. But one world had survived, a small planet in the outer reaches of the system, so minor that the Velthri had not bothered to finish conquering it. Before the combined fleet crisis demanded their attention, by the time they thought about it again, human ships were already there. Primitive creatures with fur legs and curious eyes, just beginning to discover fire. They had no idea how close they had come to extinction. They had no idea that silent guardians now watched over them from the darkness between stars. "We saved them," Elena whispered. "We did. Not all of them, but these ones, at least." Elena looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the atmosphere, the first Silani ships were docking at the station that humans had built for exactly this purpose. Somewhere out there, the compact of equals was growing, one species at a time. Somewhere out there, a small world full of innocent creatures continued to exist, because humanity had refused to forget. Then it was not enough. It could never be enough. The debt of the other sanctuary systems would never come back. The suffering of those primitive species could never be undone. The galaxy was still full of cruelty and injustice and powerful beings who saw weakness as an invitation. But it was a start. Do you think they'll learn? Elena asked. The Velthuri, the old Confederation. Do you think they'll ever understand? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Some of them will, he said finally. Some of them already have. Others never will. That's the thing about choices. You can't make them for other people. You can only show them what's possible and hope they choose wisely. And if they don't, then we'll be here, watching, waiting, ready to stand between them and the ones they want to hurt. Elena nodded slowly. It was not the ending she had dreamed of when she first walked into the assembly chamber. As a young diplomat, full of hope and belief in the Confederation's ideals. It was not the galaxy she had wanted to help build. But maybe it was better, smaller, harder, more honest. A galaxy where some species chose to protect the weak instead of prey on them. A galaxy where strength was measured not by how many you could destroy, but by how many you could save. A galaxy where humanity stood as guardians, not conquerors, not because they lacked the power to conquer, but because they had chosen something more difficult. The sun finished setting. Stars appeared in the darkening sky. Elena watched them for a long time, thinking about all the worlds she would never visit, all the species she would never meet, all the futures that were still being written across the vast darkness. We did the right thing, she said at last, walking away, making them see us clearly, all of it. Did we? Yes, Elena smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached her eyes. We showed them what humanity really is, not what we pretended to be, not what they wanted us to be, what we really are. And what's that? Elena looked at the stars and thought about the guardian stations, silent and patient, watching over worlds full of creatures who would never know their names. The ones who choose to remember, she said. The ones who refuse to look away. The ones who stand up when everyone else sits down. She reached out and touched the tablet, looking at the report one more time. Four-legged creatures discovering fire. A whole species that would live because humanity had refused to accept their death.